Today we're going to solve equations, and it's going to be review. And we use equations a lot in the geometry. We apply it to the geometry. So we want to review the skill. In our example here, it says solve the following equations, leave the final answer in simplest fraction form when necessary. So all that means is we're not going to write our answers with decimals if they don't come out to be integer answers. And what's happening here on this first one, it's 7v minus 17 is equals 60. But what we're going to do to solve this is we are going to isolate the variable. And the variable in this case is v. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to move the 17 over to the other side by adding 17 to both sides. We get 7v equals 77. Again, what our goal is to solve for v. It's 7 times v. So in order to undo the multiplication, we're going to divide both sides by 7. And when we do, we're left with v equals 11 because the 7's cancel out. Problem letter B. It says z over 6. I'm sorry that didn't print very well. Z over 6 plus 5 equals 10. Again, what we still want to do is we want to figure out what does z equal. And again, if you're uncomfortable with the letter z, use x. That is fine. But we want to isolate. And in order to isolate, we're going to start by subtracting 5 from both sides. And we get z divided by 6 equals 10 minus 5, which is 5. This time we have division in here. It's z divided by 6. To undo the division, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply this side by 6. And if we multiply one side by 6, then we need to multiply the other side by 6. And the nice thing is that 6 divided by 6 cancels out, and we're left with our z. And 5 times 6 is 30. Letter C. 8x plus 12 equals 5x minus 9. We have a variable on both sides this time. And I would like to suggest that you solve it the way you solved it in Algebra 1. What I tend to say is I tend to say letter on the left. So I'm going to move my variable to the left. And on this particular problem, it's how your Algebra 1 teacher probably taught you. We're going to start by moving the 5x from the right side over to the left side. And when we subtract 5x from both sides, 8x minus 5x is 3x plus 12 equals negative 9. Since we moved the letter to the left, we now need to move the number to the right side. So we're going to move this 12 over to the other side. Since it's add 12, we're going to do the opposite, which is to subtract 12. And we end up with 3x equals negative 21. And again, we're going to undo the multiplication. It's 3 times x, so we're going to divide both sides by 3. And when we divide both sides by 3, we get x equals negative 7. Letter D. We have more than one x term on the left side of the equation. So what we have to do in this particular case is we have to combine like terms. And we do. We want to combine like terms. So we're going to start with the 6x and the 8x. Those are like terms. They both have an x in them. 6x plus 8x is 14x. It isn't the only set of like terms over here on the left side of the equal sign. We have 20 minus 10, which is also a set of like terms. And 20 minus 10 is 10. And that still equals 150. We want to move the 10 over to the other side because we want to isolate the variable. We want to get the variable by itself. Since it's plus 10, we're going to subtract 10. We get 14x equals 140. Well, it's 14 times x. We want to undo that multiplication. So we're going to divide both sides by 14. And we end up with x equals 10. Same thing on letter E. We need to deal with the like terms in this problem. We have like terms on the same side of the equation. They're separated out a little bit more on letter E, but 7x minus 9x is negative 2x. 13 minus 2 is 11. And then we equal 9. So once we combine the like terms, then we can solve this equation. We're going to move the 11. We're going to subtract 11 over to the other side so we can isolate. We can get the variable by itself. We get negative 2x equals negative 2. And once again, with the multiplication, we need to undo that. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 2. And we end up with x equals 1. Letter F. Still, watch out on the problem. 12x minus 7x plus 14 equals 10x minus 1. We have like terms. Over here on the left side of the equation, we need to combine like terms. 12x minus 7x is 5x plus 14 equals 10x minus 1. Again, go back to how your Algebra 1 teacher taught you. I like to move my letter to the left, and this probably isn't the way your Algebra 1 teacher taught you. I'm going to move the 10x over to the left side. You do not have to solve it this way. Just check and make sure that you get the same answer that I do in the end. But I like to move my letter to the left. It's an easy saying to remember. 5x minus 10x is negative 5x plus 14 equals negative 1. Now, since I moved my letter to the left, I'm going to move my number to the right. So the plus 14 then is going to be subtract 14. And we end up with negative 5x equals negative 15. Finally, it's negative 5 times x, so we have to undo that multiplication. We're going to undo it by dividing. And negative 15 divided by negative 5 is 3. Letter G. Still watch out for combining like terms. And we have two sets of like terms over here on the left side. We've got the 6x plus 3x, which is 9x. 7 minus 1, which is 6. And then we have the 12x times the 15. Here's how your Algebra 1 teacher may have taught you. They may have said, move the smaller variable to where the bigger variable is. I mostly don't do this, but we can subtract 9x from both sides. The reason that they use that method is because then you're left with a positive value over here. So we have 6 equals 3x minus 15. But this time we moved the letter to the right, so we need to move the number to the left. It's subtracting 15, so we're going to add 15 to both sides. And we end up with a 21 equals 3x. And then finally, 3 times x, we need to undo that multiplication. We're going to do that by dividing both sides. And lastly, we get x equals 7. Lots of things going on in problem H. 8x minus 7 plus 3x plus 3 equals 6x plus 32 plus 2x. We've got like terms on the left side. We've got like terms on the right side. We need to deal with those. 8x and 3x. And it's 8x plus 3x, which is 11x. Negative 7 plus 3 is 4. There's also like terms on the other side. We've got 6x and we have 2x, which is 8x. Remember, we add the number in front of the variable, we keep the variable. So 6 plus 2 is 8, keep the x, plus 32. And then again, I'm going to go back to the letter on the left. I'm going to subtract 8x from both sides. We want to get all of the variables together, and we've got variables on each side. Subtract 8x from both sides. 11x minus 8x is 3x. And then we're going to move the 4 over to the other side. Since it's minus 4, we're going to add 4 to both sides. We get 3x equals 36. And finally, 3 times x. To undo multiplication, we divide. And we get x equals 12. X divided by 30 equals 2/5. And there's a couple ways to do this problem, and a lot of you, what you're probably going to do is you're probably going to multiply both sides by 30. But then you have to do 2/5 times 30. And if you have a calculator, that works out great. But here's a way that you don't really need the calculator. And what I'm going to do for our, if I can spell, for our final examples, is I'm going to cross multiply. And what happens when we cross multiply is we multiply these two values together, and we multiply those two values together. X times 5 is 5x. 30 times 2 is 60. And then we can solve. Again, undoing this multiplication, 5 times x, divide both sides by 5, we get x equals 12. Again, not the only way to solve that equation. That's a way, especially if you don't have a calculator close at hand. And it's a little bit better when we do this particular problem. Again, it's going to be 15 times 2, I'll write it out, equals 4x times 45. And when we multiply these, 15 times 2 is 30. 4x times 45 is 180x. And this time we're going to get a fraction. And this is maybe when you do want a calculator momentarily. But 180 times x, we're going to undo the multiplication by dividing. And if you need to here, if you don't like fractions at all, you pull out your calculator. On this particular screen, we go to alpha, y equals, and enter, and we type in 30, and then we type in 180. I use the arrow, the down arrow button, and 30 divided by 180 is 1/6, which is our solution to this particular equation. And again, there's some variances for you to solve equations. This is just my particular method when I see a fraction on the left side of the equation and a fraction on the right side of the equation. Cross multiply. So this time I'm going to take 3x plus 1 and multiply it by 3. I personally like to write the 3 out in front. It makes no difference if you put the 3 here, out back, instead of out front. On the other side, then we're going to be doing 2 times 4. And typically, if you're checking your answers on Canvas or something, I have the 8 written already there. Now this problem requires us to use distributive property. And distributive property says what's outside the parentheses gets multiplied by what's inside the parentheses. Sometimes people call it the rainbow method. 3 times 3x is 9x. 3 times 1 is 3. And again, 2 times 4 is 8. Now we have it in the form that we've been solving for the last 15 minutes or so. We're going to subtract 3 from both sides. And we get 9x equals 5. And then 9 times x, we're going to undo that by dividing. And we're left with x equals 5/9. Don't convert that to a decimal. Just leave it as a fraction. To finish, once again, cross multiply. When you see a fraction on the left side, a fraction on the right side, just one set of fractions on each side. We can take x minus 2 and multiply by 8. Again, I prefer to write the 8 in front of the parentheses. You can write the 8 in the back of the parentheses. On the other side, x plus 1 times 4. So in this particular case, we're going to have to distribute on both sides of the equation. Here and here. 8 times x is 8x. 8 times 2 is 16. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 1 is 4. And now we're going to move the letter to the left. Subtract 4x on both sides. And we're left with 4x minus 16 equals 4. We're going to move the 16 to the other side by adding 16. And we get 4x equals 20. 4 times x. We have to undo the multiplication by dividing. And finally, 20 divided by 4 is 5.